Miami, Florida State, not the only game to watch in the ACC this week. Oh, but in that in-state showdown, yeah, give me the Canes.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. An upset alert in the Big Ten, an upset alert in the SEC. Just games to keep an eye on. We're at the midway point in the week. That's when we officially start to close the page on last week and we look ahead to what's coming up in the Group of 5 playoff hunt. Far be it from me to forget to inform you that a Group of 5 team is getting into the playoff every year. I'll tell you why that could get a big shakeup this weekend. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So Miami travels to Florida State this week. Florida State coming off a pretty shocking loss, at least in the Seminole community, I'm sure, to Virginia. That is ranked Virginia. Either today or tomorrow, depending on when you're listening to the show, I will have my first ever top 25 unveiled, primarily built upon what teams have accomplished up to this point, but not entirely. Not entirely, for sure. In this matchup, though, Florida State is at home, and they're a home underdog, according to our friends at FanDuel, 4.5 points. There's a very clear reason for that. Miami is a better team, and Florida State in this matchup is looking to prove that that Alabama game wasn't their peak, that they didn't come out and pull a stunner in week one in the eyes of a lot of people, myself included, catapult themselves into the top 10, and then just fall all the way down after that. If they're going to do that, there is one thing in particular they've got to do this week that I don't know how you feel good about it if you are a Florida State fan. You got to stop the run. You got to stop. What's the greatest equalizer or neutralizer for a home crowd that should be on fire in Tallahassee this weekend? A running game. A running game is demoralizing. It slows the game down. It takes the air out of the stadium. You know Miami wants to run the ball. They've got good backs. They've got a great offensive line. And yes, Carson Beck is a tremendous complement to that. But fundamentally, we all know at this point, Mario Cristobal likes running the ball. And Miami's incredibly capable at running the football. How do you think Florida State's run defense has been so far this year? If you looked at the overall numbers, you would think, well, that's not so bad. That's actually pretty good. They've played Alabama, who doesn't have that much of an interest in running the ball. It's just not the way their coaching staff is wired. They want to run everything through their quarterback, Ty Simpson, who continues to look better as the games go on. Good sign for the Crimson Tide, of course. They have played, East Texas A&M and Kent State. Now, in those games, they surrendered 87, 105, and 43 rushing yards. That isn't a problem. Here's what is a problem. Virginia, on the road, granted, just went for 211. Do you think that the Virginia Cavaliers have even half the talent on their roster up and down that Miami does? Because I really don't. And this is why I like Miami to win this game. Florida State had an incredible week one performance. I was not high on them coming into the season, and last week, they showed some cracks. Now, they've got an opportunity this week to prove they're legitimate in the ACC title race. But they will not be in the conference championship game, nor will they be in the college football playoff this year if they do not beat Miami this weekend. You're going to start 0-2 in conference play. You're probably not going to get there. You go with a loss to Virginia and then lose to Miami, you'd have to go unbeaten the rest of the way. Probably not going to happen. And you're not getting into the college football playoff at 9-3. Now, that doesn't mean this isn't still a successful season. I think coming into the year, you had to look at Florida State and say just making a bowl game would have been a success. And beating Alabama, of course, went well beyond those expectations. Now, that they've had that win resets the expectations. But I haven't done that fully for Florida State. I think a lot of people have. I think a lot of people looked at them after they beat Alabama in week 1. And they said, oh, this is a top 10 team. And based on the AP poll, yes, they should have been put into the top 10. But we now know after the Virginia game, at least to this point, going into the Miami game, yeah, they're not ready to be the greatest bounce back story ever. They can still be a good bounce back story. If Florida State goes 7-5 this year, Seminole fans, would you have taken that after last year? Go back to August 28th. If I had told you you'll win 7 games this season and beat Alabama, is that a success? It absolutely is. I think Miami's going to win this game and knock them out of any serious college football playoff or ACC championship discussion. That does not mean the year needs to be seen as a failure for Florida State. Miami's further ahead, but you're gaining ground. Miami's a better team than you. And if you go out and win, hey, all those hopes are alive. I'll come on here and eat crow. That's the way that this arrangement works here at Locked On College Football. But I like Miami to win that game. Don't have my score yet. That'll come later in the week. But it's not the only game I'm keeping an eye on in the ACC. I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm going to say, because it's wild to talk about Miami, Florida State in the same breath as Virginia and Louisville. But guess what? The ACC title ramifications and therefore college football playoff ramifications are incredibly real. Virginia, now into the top 25. They will be in my top 25 when it comes out this week. They are 6.5-point underdogs going to Louisville, who I'm telling you is one of the least impressive 4-0 teams to begin the college football season. They have been fighting, scrapping, and clawing their way to wins. I liked them coming into the year. I liked Miller Moss. He's had some turnover problems. I like Jeff Brom. The team looks okay. They've got some they're okay. But that's a battle of unbeaten ACC teams. Who would have thunk it? But hey, I know there's just one league game that's been played for Louisville. Let me throw another one at you. That again, it sounds crazy to think of this as a big game, but as you start to get into league play, you can't confirm. It's like a golf tournament. You can't, on the PGA Tour, major championship, anything like that. You can't win the tournament on Thursday, but you can lose it on Thursday. Florida State can't guarantee or even feel like it's all but a guarantee they'd make the ACC title game if they beat Miami on Saturday. But because they lost to Virginia, they can lose it on Saturday. And you'll see teams start getting knocked off one by one. You'll go up, down they go, up, down they go. So Louisville this week, interesting game to watch. How does Virginia respond after the biggest win of the Tony Elliott era? Here's another one. Duke, who I liked coming into the year, is going all the way across the country to play one of the best quarterbacks in college football in Jaren Kiawe-Sangopolatele and the California Golden Bears. The Blue Devils are a slight favorite in that game, according to our friends at FanDuel. Duke is 2-0 in ACC play. And Cal, despite an ugly loss to San Diego State, if not for that, they might be a top 25 team right now. But they are 1-0 to start the ACC conference slate because they scrapped their way to win against Boston College. I bring this up because with the ACC and the Big 12 both, because of how the non-conference slate went, getting 2 teams in the playoff, not going to be easy. You will need 11-plus win teams to square off in the conference championship game, I think, to guarantee that you get 2 teams in. So just keep an eye on those matchups. I know Miami, Florida State grabs all the headlines, as it should. That's why I talked about it first. But these games in the ACC, just starting to get interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. Upset alerts. They're around every week, aren't they? And guess what? I'm putting the same team on the upset alert meter as last week, but as the upsetter, not the upsettee. Do I have that grammar right? Stick around and find out. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes are sweating all the details. Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but everyday drives, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season, which is exactly what you want from your car. Comfort and reliability, most importantly. Like the players of your favorite team, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode also brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That is why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings together your entire financial life in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives like you and me and people that you probably know as well. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals. You don't have to touch a spreadsheet. It's going to make your financial picture get even better. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. Can I interest you in some upset alerts? Good. I'm glad, because we are officially looking ahead to the next week on the college football calendar. That's week 6. I know it's going fast, but I hope we're having a lot of fun. Teams that have been upset this year, not having so much fun. However, it's still fun to talk about. I'm going to put Mississippi State on, I think, the upsetter, and this week will be Texas A&M as the potential upsettee. This week, we're going to keep an eye on that, but I'll talk about that matchup more in just a moment. Let me start with Washington. Now, this wouldn't be the typical upset that you would see get blasted all over social media, because Washington isn't ranked, and Washington just had a chance to pull an upset themselves against Ohio State. I thought they would perform better. Their offense, not ready. Plus, they lost Carver Willis at offensive tackle, potentially for the season. That would be really bad. He's been their best offensive lineman and their left tackle, and that was the area they needed to improve the most coming out of Jed Fish's first season at the helm. So now Washington, down 1, maybe 2 key players, after a loss against Ohio State in which the air was just sucked right out of that stadium that was rocking, as always. It being Washington's football team, has to go across the country and play Maryland. Now, before the year, your perception of Maryland probably wasn't very high. My perception of Maryland wasn't very high. You've got a coach that feels like the results are middling, feels like they're trending downwards. They're trying to make investments in NIL, but, has it really paid off with the talent on the roster? Well, they're at least ahead of Wisconsin. We know that. Talk about coaches on the hot seat. Yeah, Luke Fickell can readily insert himself into that conversation. They play Michigan this week. I've got no upset alert meter whatsoever, which is odd because I'm such a Michigan hater, as I've been told many a times over the years. But yeah, they're going to push Wisconsin around, and Maryland, frankly, did everything that they could have possibly wanted to in that game, and Wisconsin's offense is just inept. Michigan's defense might hold them under 10 points. I think that is a real possibility in Ann Arbor this week. But I'm getting away from the game I wanted to mention here. Maryland is just a 6.5-point underdog this week against Washington, who's going all the way across the country. Early contender for one of my best bets of the week. Now, if you're a Washington fan, that might make you feel pretty good because my best bets haven't been very reliable this year. But if you don't know the name Malik Washington, you really should. The Terrapins would like him to be their quarterback next year. Someone's going to try and pluck him away because a guy who was a true freshman just went on the road to beat a Big Ten team comfortably in Wisconsin and is completing 60% of his passes this year. Not the most efficient necessarily, but 8 touchdowns and 1 pick. Did you know that Maryland is undefeated? Did you know that? I know they didn't play a tough non-conference slate. I'm not a fan of that because you don't have a real measuring stick until league play begins. Well, they at least got a measuring stick. Malik Washington went for 265 yards in their 27-10 win over Wisconsin last week. And if you watch the game, 27-10 is actually closer than the game really was. Maryland was significantly better in that game than Wisconsin, even though the game was being played in Madison. but Malik Washington has thrown for at least 250 yards in all 4 games this year. They're at home. Washington has to make a long trip. And last year, I know that Washington is a better team this year, and I felt that way coming into the season. Last year, Washington made a long cross-country trip, which are difficult, and they went to Rutgers. And I think that game was even played on a Friday night. But when you go all the way across the country, it's just challenging. That's just the way that it goes, particularly in the regular season. When you have a little bit of a layoff in bowl season and whatnot in the playoff, it can be different. But anyway, Washington's going across the country, probably feeling maybe they go into we're ticked off mode. Let's show people who we really are mode. Let's go on the road and beat Maryland by 20 points. If they do that, I'd be more impressed than the average college football fan would be. They just say, oh, Washington beat Maryland. I'd say, oh, Washington went through what they went through last week against Ohio State, and then they went all the way on the road and beat a 4-0 confident Maryland team who's got a true freshman quarterback that looks really good so far. Yeah, that's, again, not a traditional upset because Washington doesn't have a number next to their name. But that's a game I'm keeping an eye on because if Jed Fish loses that one, questions will be raised. Washington should win the game, but hey, there's something to teams that are just playing winning football, and Maryland's at least doing that. For the most part, they impressed against a weak non-conference slate. Anyway, continuing on with another upset alert to be wary of out there. And this is just becoming an almost weekly segment because I talked about Mississippi State's ability to keep it close with Arizona State. They won the game. Talked about their ability to keep it close. They actually have been my best team to ride in my best bets that have succeeded this year because I have put them in plus 6.5 at home against Arizona State. They won the game outright. That would have been good for my ESPN Game Day Superdog standings. And I had them plus 7.5 last week against Tennessee. They lose by 7. Don't forget about those half-point hooks. They're plus 14.5 this week, according to our friends at FanDuel, going down to College Station and playing Texas A&M. Now, the reason for that is likely rooted in the fact that Texas A&M's offense is mostly pretty good, coming off of a very poor week against an Auburn team that is good defensively. But Mississippi State, who I continue to contend should be ranked inside the top 25. You might see them in there later this week. They'd have to beat Texas A&M to still be in that spot. However, they have been playing good football this season. You were competitive with a Tennessee team that looks like an SEC and playoff contender this year, and Mississippi State had a chance. They had a real opportunity to win that football game. Blake Shapen continues to do good things for Jeff Lebby in that offense, and I'm really intrigued. Here's a crazy thing to say. Mississippi State's program is in a better place than Auburn right now. I feel like Auburn is rudderless. They're 2 bad games away from, maybe 1, from firing their head coach. They feel like they are stagnating. There's not a bunch of progression. I watched Mississippi State last year to this year and say they are going on an upward trajectory. And it's a really good sign if you are a Bulldogs fan. So for Mississippi State here, this is a bigger test because you're on the road. But if you go out and pull this one off, it'll just be another one of those games you go, we got the right guy. I think you've already had one of those games with Arizona State. It's a big number at 14.5 because Texas A&M is far more talent. Mississippi State's defense is not fully ready for them to be a good SEC team. That'll be something they need to address in the offseason. But I'd keep an eye on this one. I'd keep an eye because I think Mississippi State is a good football team. And Marcel Reed throwing the ball, inconsistent. When he's there, boy, the big plays, they're awesome. They are exciting. It is an electrifying offense. When they're not there, I have not seen Texas A&M consistently work a short and intermediate passing game. And maybe Mississippi State's defense could take advantage. Maybe they take a step forward this week. If they can keep that game somewhat low scoring, I think they can go toe-to-toe with Texas A&M offensively. Just keep an eye on that one, would you? Okay, good. Thank you. Keep an eye on the Group of 5 playoff race. Could get a big shakeup this week. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet. Put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You should probably start with going against my picks because it's off to a rough start. Fade the picks guy or fade this. Yeah, I can't push back. I need a big week. I need like a 4-1, 5-0 sort of stretch. I don't know what I'll come up with. I'm going to be browsing FanDuel all week long, figuring out which lines and games I feel like are advantageous situations for me to be in. And we just haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten yet. We're not even halfway through the regular season. So I don't know what you're waiting for. Go check out FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Check them out at FanDuel.com. This episode also brought to you by our friends at Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots, they're running on Square. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. These are places that become an extension of home. It could be the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, or the spot with the best wings in town for game day, that local chain that has been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together, and when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And anytime you go to these sorts of spots, you've probably used Square. I've used Square I don't even know how many times. There's a little kind of shopping center, strip mall area really close to my apartment, and everyone that I go to, it feels like, is running on Square. Why? Because it makes the outcome really easy to get to, which is I want to get my stuff, they want to get paid, and what do you know? You get right there. It's really, really easy to use. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/LockedOnCollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. When you think about the Group of 5 playoff hunt, which is well underway, Tulane should be the favorite. South Florida should be second. They're in the same conference. That could be an electric conference championship game. Now, the Green Wave have a distinct advantage over other schools vying for this position. Hey, don't forget about Memphis. Do not forget about the Memphis Tigers either. Remember, they beat Arkansas, got Sam Pittman fired. Or at least they were a contributing factor to Sam Pittman no longer being Arkansas's head coach. Yep, Memphis did that. Crazy game, but they were in that spot. And anytime you can hold not just a Power 4 win, but a Big Ten or SEC win over the heads of your other Group of 5 playoff counterparts, potential playoff counterparts, I should say, it's a pretty significant advantage. Those opportunities are few and far between. You typically have 1 or 2, or if you're Tulane, you put 3 on your schedule coming into the season, and the Green Wave did exactly what they needed to. They are the Tulane Green Wave, the biggest fans of a team I mentioned briefly earlier in the show. They would love nothing more than for Duke to go on the road and beat Cal, and for Duke to ascend to the top of the ACC, or at least be near it. If they can be a 2-loss team in the hunt for the conference championship game when it's all said and done at the end of the regular season, that would be a huge benefit for Tulane's resume as a potential Group of 5 playoff champion. You understand. Group of 5 conference champion in the playoff. All right. Now that I've got I'm just like all over the place here. But I think Tulane's number 1. South Florida's still number 2 because they've got the win over Boise State. Here's the shakeup that could happen this weekend. And look, if you just look at the point spread, which is a piece of information, but not all of the information, then this won't happen. Boise State travels to Notre Dame. That is this week. Can't lose that game if you're Marcus Freeman. I don't suspect that they will. I also didn't suspect that Boise State would get blown out by South Florida. I didn't suspect that South Florida would go into Gainesville and beat the Florida Gators. All of those things happened so far this year. Just throwing it out there. I didn't suspect Vanderbilt would beat Alabama last year. No, they call it an upset or a surprise for a reason. No one ever expects it to happen, or else you wouldn't call it an upset. So Boise State has their last best chance to put themselves into the thick of things this weekend. The Broncos simply have to find a way. It does not matter what it looks like, who gets injured, what bad call gets made by an officiating crew, which we know is just kind of standard operating procedure at this point. It does not matter if you find a way to win, you can be back at the big kids table. If you don't, I just don't see it. I just don't see it, Boise, and you'll have to start building on stuff to carry over into next season when you talk about getting into the college football playoff because the other teams are going to leave you behind. Yes, Tulane got beat handily by Ole Miss. And yeah, South Florida got their brains kicked in a little, not a lot, but a little against Miami. No shame. Those are really good teams. They're going to be in the top 5. Those are both top 5 teams in my preseason, or not preseason, in my college football current top 25 that is coming out this week. Follow Locked On College Football on Twitter to see that, and you can tear it to shreds if you like. But even though those games took place, the other wins that they have, to me, make this a 3-horse race at the moment. You have got Tulane, you have got South Florida, you have got Memphis. I think those are the clear-cut contenders. And those are schools that, because of what they've already accomplished, I think have the ability to control their own destiny going forward. They do. Tulane's got a win over Northwestern that beat UCLA over the weekend. Won't finish last in the Big Ten. Who could have seen that UCLA wouldn't be any good? Anyway. And they've got a win over Duke, who's off to a 2-0 start in the ACC. South Florida, the SEC win, you can't overlook that. The head-to-head over Boise, the fashion in which they did that back in week 1. All of those things are making this a really fascinating race, but also I think are allowing those schools to really separate from the rest of the pack. So keep an eye, as I always say here on the show, far be it from me to forget to inform you, the college football public, that a Group of 5 team is getting into the college football playoff. That is where things stand right now. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.